Hello, welcome to Executorium's Estate Talks. I'm George Compton, the publisher of Executorium. Today we ask, where's the heirs? Are there additional heirs? Do we need an investigation? We have Michael Zwick, attorney turned private investigator, to answer. Check out his company, Inherit More, at InheritMore.com. So, Michael, what is the first thing an executor needs to know when an estate's heirs are MIA, unknown, the beneficiaries are somewhere, the situation's hazy?
Well, thank you, George. I'm glad to be here. I know this might sound a little self-serving, but the answer is that there are options out there when someone tries to do it themselves to find the heirs, to track them down. The resources that are available to them are out there, but they're free. And there's the old saying, you get what you pay for. Whereas there are companies like mine that have access to databases and other tools and just the know-how and experience to track down people. And I should go back on the whole thing of you get what you pay for, because a lot of work that we do, for example, we actually don't charge the estate. We get paid by the heirs for bringing them their inheritance that they're going to get.
Well, excellent. And it's not self-serving. For executors, knowing what resources are out there is one of our missions as uh, putting ourselves in executor shoes and in a mindset being an executor facing. You've got to be aware of what is available as far as professional help. So knowing about professional beneficiary search professionals, very important. So, Michael, please name a few scenarios where an estate might need a beneficiary investigation.
Typically you have cases where, or we have cases where someone dies and nobody knows who the heirs are. Working on a case right now in Pennsylvania. A woman died. Her, she had an attorney appointed to be her guardian while she was living in a nursing home. Her children died, and she was beyond the capacity to do a will. And she also was not able to communicate to the guardian who her heirs were. And meanwhile, she had about $5 million in the bank. So the guardian turned to us and said, "Can you find her heirs?" Unfortunately, we have, and it's now in process. Other cases are where you have an heir a single heir who they know who it is, they know the name, but nobody knows where the person is. There's this got estranged. Some people like to move around. They lose touch with people, and not all families are so close knit that they keep in touch with each other.
And the name of the individual you're seeking is Michael Smith or Michael Patel.
It could be. We did have a William Smith, not the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, but we did once find the William Smith. As actually I just posted on LinkedIn this morning. I love people with unique names. They're easier to find.
Right. Uh, well, just to put us all on the ground of a beneficiary search, can you provide another couple of examples or one example uh, of what a beneficiary search looks like?
Sure. So, one of my most interesting cases I had was a case where a guy died a few years ago in Detroit, living in a pretty rundown neighborhood, but he had a few $100,000 in the bank, and nobody knew who his heirs were. His body actually was laying in the morgue for about a month before he finally was buried. And we went to work on it, and what we discovered was that through a lot of digging, through a lot of archive work, was that his name was not originally Cooper, which was the name he died with, but it was a Russian name that he and his family immigrated to the States when he was a teenager. We also found that he and his brother got into some trouble with the law and served some time in the Michigan prison system. Just it was kind of just that pulling the thread of each thing, each little data point or fact that we would find would lead to the next step. Finally, we were able to determine that while he and his brother had no children, they had a sister who had moved to Toronto, and she had actually a pretty law-abiding life. She had children. She passed away, but she left three children who were the heirs, and they were able to inherit from their uncle.
Yes. Well, that sounds like something I would not want to wade into as an executor without knowing all those ropes and data points and resources. So, not a DIY project for me as an executor, certainly. So, I'm sure the guardian was happy to have
Yeah,
your
and,
help.
one of the things I should point out also is that the executor is a fiduciary. The executor has a duty to the estate and to its heirs and to the parties to the estate. So that becomes a big issue, is because if the executor doesn't do his or her job fully and winds up leaving out an heir because the research wasn't complete, and then distributes the estate to only people they find out about, and that missing heir comes up later and says, "Hey, where's my inheritance?" Uh, the executor can be on the hook for that person, personally out of his or her own pocket because they didn't do the job. So it's really important to make sure that cross all T's, dot all the I's. Some courts will, before you even proceed, will require a really strong showing that of what efforts were made to find and identify all the errors. That actually can, in some ways, work to the executor's benefit because the judge will already have looked it over and given the stamp of approval that you've done everything you could. Some states are pretty lax, but then the blame or the responsibility still stays on the executor down the road if somebody comes forward.
Yes, and thank you for that. That's hitting on a couple of topics, especially the fiduciary aspect. A lot of executors don't even know what that word means until they find themselves in the role. So if I'm an executor and I don't find an heir, that's not in the best interests of the estate. That's actually in my interest because if I am an heir and a beneficiary, I will inherit more. And uh, judges don't like that if an heir shows up and you haven't done everything to your
Well, let me, if
utmost.
I can correct you, if you have identified an error, you just can't find them, then
Well,
that
thank
error
you.
portion will be put off to the side. So it's not as if a case, just hypothetically, you have three errors, and if you're the executor and you know where two of the errors are, you don't know where the third one is. It's not like you can say, "Well, I don't know where that third one is, so therefore these two will split that third errors portion." That missing errors portion will be put off to the side and usually deposited with usually the county or the state, depends on which state you're in. The danger becomes where you just haven't even identified the errors. So, for example, take my hypothetical forward. You know of three errors, and because of some shoddy work, or you're just not doing all the work, you don't realize there's a fourth error out there. So meanwhile, you've divided the estate into three portions, each one getting one third, whereas all of a sudden, no, it really should have been 25% each. So that's more of the danger, is not so much not there is the danger of not knowing where errors are, but more importantly is not knowing who all the errors are, and then doing the math wrong. And that's really where it comes back to bite you.
Yeah, that could bite you big. And thank you for the clarification, Michael. Not knowing where errors are and not knowing of errors are two distinct scenarios. Also, you point out the state laws can be quite different, state to state, and in satisfying your requirements under the law per state as fiduciary, as executor, you need to know what your legal obligations are. So that would be statute in code in in your state's section of code regarding states wills and trusts, and you can look that up. So that is something that you should be aware of, and you're obligated to be aware of as an executor.
Yeah, I would add one thing though, as something that I learned as an attorney, is that very early on in my career as an attorney, before I got into what I do now, which is that, um, as you said, there's the law, the statutes, the court rules, but then there are the unwritten rules and the practices that are basically rules for a particular court or judge. So not only do the rules and laws change from state to state, but from county to county, even within a county, from judge to judge. And some judges might be more demanding than others in terms of your proofs, or whether they want someone to come in and testify as to what efforts were made. So you really need to know, and that's why it behooves an executor or a trustee to really have professional advice, not just in terms of finding heirs, but also an attorney who knows the ropes of that particular jurisdiction.
Well, that's just excellent advice. Thank you very much for that, Michael. You just touched on the differences between de jure and de facto.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And I'm not even an attorney, but in the trenches as an executor for a period of time, what you just illustrated is very real. So executors need to have a sensitivity about it. So thank you, Michael. You work a lot with executors. Any parting advice?
No, just the parting advice is what I said in the beginning is don't think you have to do this alone. Being an executor, especially if you're doing it for family member, then you're probably grieving for that family member. Most people who are executors tend to be the children of the deceased, which means they're usually in that quote sandwich generation where they're balancing, not only grief, but also having family, having children, having jobs, having is it's being an executor can be a time and emotion sucking experience. There's no preparation for it, and there are plenty of professionals. Just like you would hire a mechanic to change the oil in your car, even though you could theoretically learn how to do it yourself. There are professionals out there, besides myself, attorneys, accountants, realtors, all these people. They're out there that can make your life easier and let you focus on the important things in life.
Great advice. Thank you very much.
My
Every
pleasure.
state is different. Every state is different. Thank you, Michael, for helping executors understand some basics about finding an estate's heirs.
My pleasure. Great to be here.
Our goal is to provide the executor with state administration context, resources, and information. Ask good questions, executors. Thank you for watching Estate Talks.